Good morning, Year 9. I hope you're well and having a lovely day. This is Mr. Souza welcoming you to today's lesson. For this lesson, you will need your exercise book and a pen. So please could you write the date and title? The title is Creative Writing Setting. After you've done that, please complete the do now. There are two parts to the do now. Firstly, what does setting refer to in a story? And secondly, why is it important? So you have 5 minutes to make sure you've got the date and title written down and have completed the do now. So please pause the video in order to do that. Okay, so I've got some answers for you. Please could you write them down if you haven't got them written down already. So setting refers to the time and place where a scene in a book or film takes place. It helps set the mood of the story. It can influence how the characters will behave. It can affect the dialogue. It can foreshadow events. It can reflect the society in which the characters live, providing a context for their actions. We're now going to look at the opening of Mice and Men and how Steinbeck, the author, sets the scene. Then you're going to answer a few questions on this passage. A few miles south of Soledad, the Salinas River drops in close to the hillside bank and runs deep and green. The water is warm too, for it has slipped, twinkling over the yellow sands in the sunlight before reaching the narrow pool. On one side of the river, the golden foothill slopes curve up to the strong and rocky Gabilan Mountains, but on the valley side, the water is lined with trees, willows, fresh and green with every spring, carrying in their lower leafed junctures the debris of the winter's flooding, and sycamores with mottled, white, recumbent limbs, and branches that arch over the pool. On the sandy bank, under the trees, the leaves lie deep and so crisp that a lizard makes a great skittering if he runs among them. So these are your questions. The novel is set in a town called Soledad, meaning solitude or being alone in Spanish. How does that establish one of the themes of the novel? Look at the underlined words in the passage. What kind of place are the men in? What part does it play in the story? The story begins and ends in the brush. What does that suggest about the life the men lead? And what do we call a story structure that starts and ends in a similar way? So we have studied this novella in depth. So your pre-existing knowledge of the novella should enable you to answer these questions in addition to analysing the passage above. So please pause the video for 5 to 10 minutes to answer those questions. Okay, so these are the answers. If you didn't get it quite right, please amend your answers. If you didn't get anything, please write it down. So answer to question 1. The town name means being alone. So to set the story there means that one of the themes is loneliness. Setting the novel in a location which has that name provides the context for the events of the novel. So it seems like an idyllic place. The men are safe and peaceful in the brush, and this is why George tells Lenny to return there if he gets into trouble. The peaceful setting could also represent the dream that George and Lenny are striving for, to have their own land, and it also provides a contrast to the hard and brutal life the men lead on the ranch. So the reason it begins and ends in the brush, it indicates that nothing changes. What they do, their lives, have no real impact on anything, so it's quite a bleak message that Steinbeck provides for us there. And finally, when a story starts and ends in a similar way, it's called a cyclical structure, as in a circle. So really effective use of the cyclical structure by Steinbeck. So please can you pause the video to make sure you've got everything written down. Okay, so we've got some more questions based on the little passage and your pre-existing knowledge of the text. So let's read this passage together. The bunkhouse was a long rectangular building Inside, the walls were whitewashed and the floor unpainted. In 3 walls there were small square windows, and in the 4th a solid door with a wooden latch. Against the walls were 8 bunks, 5 of them made up with blankets, and the other 3 showing their burlap ticking. Over each bunk there was nailed an apple box, with the opening forward, so that it made 2 shelves for the personal belongings of the occupant of the bunk, and these shelves were loaded with little articles, soap and talcum powder, razors, and those Western magazines Frenchmen love to read and scoff at and secretly believe. And there were medicines on the shelves, and little vials, combs, and, from nails on the box sides, a few neckties. Near one wall there was a black cast iron stove, its stovepipe going straight up through the ceiling. In the middle of the room stood a big square table, littered with playing cards, and around it were grouped boxes for the players to sit on. So these are your 6 questions. Does the bunkhouse have a lot of light? How can you tell? How many beds are there in the bunkhouse? Would the men have much privacy? Was there a lot of room for personal possessions? Why would the men enjoy reading Western magazines? What would the men sit on? Would these be comfortable? And what do the men do in their free time in the bunkhouse? So pause the video for 5 to 10 minutes to answer these questions. So these are your answers. Answer to 1, no. Only 3 walls had windows and they were small. Answer to 2, 8. No, because there were so many others in the room. 3, no, because there were only 2 small shelves for personal items next to each bunk. Answer to 4, to dream of another life, to escape the dull everyday life they are in for a few minutes. Answer to 5, small boxes, no. And answer to 6, not much to do at all, play cards, read magazines. So please pause the video to make sure you've got the answers correct. If not, please amend or write down the correct answer. Okay, so now task number 3. Using the answers to the questions below, write a paragraph on what it would have been like to live in the bunkhouse. For example, it would appear quite gloomy and possibly depressing because of the lack of light. The men might have felt caged in because of the small windows. Secondly, how does the setting of the bunkhouse therefore provide a context for the action of the novel? So the key word for that question is therefore. Link it back to question 1. How does that setting create a really strong context for the novel for Steinbeck to build on in terms of the action that comes next and the key themes? Again, you can use your knowledge of the novel to help you answer this question. So please pause the video for 10 minutes to do that now. So this is a potential answer for question 1. It would appear quite gloomy and possibly depressing because of the lack of light. The men might have felt caged in because of the small windows. The sparseness of the room and the lack of any material comforts reflects the hard life the men lead. The limited room for possessions in the shelves show the men do not stay long enough to need more room for their stuff. Although there are 8 bunks in the room, there is no real opportunity for them to get to know each other. Men are coming and going all the time, as we see when George discovers a tin of lice powder left by the last man. This emphasizes their loneliness and the lack of permanency that they have in their lives. Potential answer for 2. By making it seem so bleak and bare, the setting of the bunkhouse establishes the loneliness and hardship the men face. We understand why Candy wants to keep his dog alive, even though it is old. We understand why Lenny desperately wants something to pet. We understand why George and Lenny have a dream to buy their own place, which is all the comforts the bunkhouse does not have. We can also see that the hardship of the life the men face would cause some men to feel frustration and anger, such as Curly. So please could you read over your own answers and think of any ways you might want to amend or improve them using the answers I've given you here. Okay, so purposes of setting. We have seen from the example of Mice and Men that setting can establish a theme, setting can provide a contrast to what happens in the story, setting can be used to create a particular type of story structure, setting can reflect the hardship of the characters' lives and provide a context for their action. So this is your final task. So for task 4, I would like you to write a description of a place as the start to a story. So think about what mood and feeling you are trying to establish through your setting. What type of story will it be, and how will the reader know? So you've got 10 minutes until the end of the lesson, which you can use to do this. I was really impressed with some of the descriptive writing you've done so far in this unit that you've sent me, so I'm really confident you can do a really creative, imaginative and detailed start to the story. So please pause the video to do that now. Okay, so let's finally reflect on this lesson. Setting is important to establish time and place. It can set the mood and tone, preparing you for the events of the story. So that brings us to the end of today's lesson. Thank you very much for your hard work. Don't forget to send me photos of your work if you would like an achievement point. I've been really interested to see some of the creative, imaginative work that you've sent me so far for this unit, so please keep that up. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson, and I'll see you next time.